Welcome to Channel 17, the Town of Colonie Government Channel.
Hello and welcome to Getting to Know You. I'm Robert Jaquay, your host. Today we're going to talk to the Town of Colonie's Chief of Police, Stephen Heider, who will give us the inside story of our fine police department. Steve, welcome and thank you for coming today.
My pleasure, Bob.
Before we start talking about the police department, and there's a lot to talk about, how about if we give our viewers a little bit of information about you and how you came to be the Chief of Police, how you came to Colonie and the police department?
Well, essentially, my family's from the Albany area, born and raised in and around the area. Came back in '61 and graduated from Colonie Central High School, Hudson Valley. Started actually at the police department in 1973. I was barely 19 years old at the time. And started as a communicator, dispatcher they were called back then. It was the start of the time when they were civilianizing their radio receiving corps, so to speak, and removing police officers from the front desk. It was a new era, not a cost-saving measure, but it's a way to get more patrolmen on the street. And gradually rose to the ranks over about a 30-year period, becoming Chief of Police 3 years ago.
And we were talking earlier, and there haven't been that many Chief of Police in the town of Colonie.
No, in our 70-plus years of existence, there's only been 5 Chiefs of Police. I'm the fifth one. You know, it lends a stability to the organization. People know that it's not something that changes frequently. And in police departments especially, you need that stability at the top to ensure the stability at the bottom and throughout the organization.
In the town of Colonies has been ranked as one of the safest communities in America for about 7 years in a row. I think we're in the top 15, and 5 of those 7 years we were in the top 10. And clearly, I think we can attribute that to several things, but to our fine police department as well.
Well, we'd like to take all the credit for it, you know, but on the same token, when we drop 1 or 2 notches, we usually like to blame somebody else, so we can't take all the credit for it. You know, when you look at those rankings, and we have been in the top 15, we've even broached the top 10 over the last 7 years, and it's a great honor to be there. But I'm the first Chief of Police to admit that, you know, when you look at the town, you look at town government, you look at what this town offers its citizens and the people that visit this town, it's not just the police department. I think we're a very visible force. I think we have a good reputation so that people feel safe in the town of Colonie. But you know, it's everything the town offers, whether it be the parks, the crossings down the road, the town park. We have excellent fire service, EMS service. We have tremendous schools. We have an active business community. Being an efficient, good police department, you're required to have good citizens. And when you offer good services and you attract good citizens, that creates a safety zone because people just want to be good. And that's something that we take pride in. I think the whole town takes pride in that. And overall, across the Capital District, we feel pretty safe. And throughout the region, it's a nice place to live, work, and play.
Well, it's a fine distinction, to be sure. Town of Colonie is a large town. 54 square miles, about 80,000 people or more now. It's a large territory. Let's talk about the police department and what that means in terms of how the department is set up and the coverage you give to the town.
Well, it's about 56 square miles, actually. And even though we have about an average population of around 80,000, our daytime population during the week swells to in the area of 150 to 200,000. And that count is derived from every office building, every vehicle on the highway, every shopping center. So we're diverse in the sense that we're a suburban town, but with a very high, intense commercial mix, office building mix, in addition to being the crossroads between all the cities within the Capital District and a major crossroads of major highways. Now, this all presents challenges to policing, so to speak. Obviously, we work out of one building at 312 Wolf Road. We've talked about substations in the past, but you know, we're a department that's too small to be big, but too big to be small. We're at that in-between point where you need hundreds of officers before you can think about substations. So what we do is we stagger our times, we stagger our deployments. We also deploy based on need. In other words, we have a very accurate statistical system to where we don't put 2 cars in an area that doesn't get 2 calls a day. we'll put those two cars in an area that gets a lot more calls per day and still get coverage in those lesser areas. Because one thing we've learned, if you don't deploy adequately, then people will realize there's no police, and then you'll start having a problem in that area. The other thing we do is a thing called problem-oriented policing. And that if we know that in and around a library you have a lot of crime, and a lot of our crime is situational, meaning that one or two bad guys picks an area and just doesn't leave an area alone. What we'll do is that we'll just create a mini task force, so to speak, and we'll saturate that area until either A, we solve the crime, we arrest the perpetrators, or B, we move it out of town. And sometimes that is exactly what happens.
I can imagine that in the course of one particular day, there's a lot of activity, variety of things. How large is the police force?
Well, we've got 109 sworn officers. We've got another 50 to 60 civilians on a part-time or full-time basis. We have a fully staffed 911 center for Albany County. We have animal control people. We have a youth court. We have a lot of different things within the police department. So even though it's 109 sworn people, we're total employee base is around 160 people. It's a very vibrant 24-hour, 7-day-a-week operation, and that is that type of atmosphere that changes by the minute. No matter what you thought you were going to do when you went to work today, either it could change before you walk through the door, or it could change in the middle of a conference that you're having that you had planned for months to have. And that's just the nature of police work. It's the nature of dealing with catastrophes. It's the nature of dealing with crime. We deal with 86,000 complaints a year. You know, our uniformed people make 18,000 new friends every year when they stop them for traffic violations. And you never know, whatever call you go on, what it's going to bring that it will entail the services of more people being sent there. And that's the hardest thing to prepare for, is the additional draw based on the need for the day or the minute versus just trying to plan something out over time.
Right. Now, in describing the department itself, you talked about the variety, some of the things you covered. How is it broken down in terms of divisions, in terms of separating the responsibilities?
Well, essentially, we have a chief, 2 deputy chiefs, we have 6 lieutenants, 13 sergeants, and the investigation division of 18 investigators, and then in the area 50 patrolmen. Now, I say in the area because our patrolmen do many different duties. You know, we have patrolmen assigned to community services. They're the people who present the DARE program, who do all those community events, crime prevention shows. They're the people that are the face of the department a lot of times, that many people think that they are the police department. Additionally, we have people within the traffic division in uniform. We have people that are administrative services. It's a full service police department that requires a lot of different aptitudes and a great diverse population within it. You know, we've got patrolmen that are pharmacists. We've had a lieutenant that was an attorney. We have business majors. We have accounting majors. The type of crime changes every day. Our individuals change every day. But the backbone of the police department still remains those people who push those blue and white police cars every day in the streets. Because it is those people that are the most visible. It's also our largest division of lieutenants, sergeants, and patrol people, that they are the stability of the town in terms of making sure we stay crime-free.
That's the patrol division you're
Absolutely. And in any police department, anybody who says anything different has a wrong perception of a police department. I'd like to say that I keep it crime-free, although I'll take credit for it on TV. But, you know, the administration is there to support that patrol division. The investigation division, although they are what's seen on TV all the time as the Crime Stoppers, they're only there to support that patrol division with specialties that then assist them in solving crime. But it is those blue and whites that we see all the time on the roads in the town. They're our deterrent effect. They are our first line of responders. They're the people that will probably have the most impact on a person's life when they call the police.
You talk in your annual report, and I want to make sure that people know how to look at the annual report through your website, but you mentioned proactive police patrol and crime prevention. Can you give me a bit more on that?
Well, I touched on it a little bit in talking about that problem-oriented policing. You know, patrol isn't about just going out and going into a zone, so to speak, and riding around. It is getting to know the people, the residents, the visitors, the business people. It is realizing that we have a problem in a certain area, and it's a unique problem to where we started riding bicycles a couple of years ago. And a lot of people thought that, why would a town police department need people on bikes? Well, you know, bikes provide the best access to people in neighborhoods. cars insulate people. But you put an officer in a neighborhood riding around a bike and stop and talk to people easily, people see that one-on-one. That's what lends that feeling of security and safety. We have ATV patrols now, all-terrain vehicles. And again, we acquired these, some through grants and some through the town support, because we had a lot of complaints in areas where ATVs were overtaking people's yards. And people couldn't live next to a field because of all the noise complaints, the disruption of their lives. And a lot of our calls are quality of life issues. And that's where the patrol division comes in, and trying to quell these little things that become major things in people's minds.
Now, is that the majority of the call, or is it safe to assume that traffic would be the most call you get or the most response you have?
Our calls are spread out through the spectrum. You know, we handle 4,000 domestic violence calls a year, tremendous amount of calls. But when you look at complaints, when I go to neighborhood meetings, when I go to neighborhood coalition meetings, that's the group of neighborhood associations that meet, the number one complaint is traffic related, is that they can't get from point A to point B, they can't get there safely, or the speeds in their neighborhoods are too quick, or they've had too much traffic because of a cut through. And you talk to the average person in a town, they don't talk that much about crime. They talk about quality of life issues, they talk about traffic, they talk about noise complaints, they talk about unruly neighbors. And that's a lot of our complaints and discussion. Although our number one complaints as far as response to are to larcenies, to petty larcenies, to domestic violence calls, to business disputes. And to be honest with you, an awful lot of these really don't have an answer to them. We handle 86,000 calls a year, give or take. We only make about 4,000 arrests. Now some people say, geez, that's a lousy success rate. Basically, a lot of that's because there is no arrest possible in tens of thousands of those other cases. You know, when two neighbors can't get along, you don't make an arrest. You try to arbitrate between the neighbors. You try to get them to a peaceful solution. And that's what an awful lot of time our officers are doing, is conflict resolution. Where people can't get along, businesses can't get along, landlords can't get along. And it's a lot of things that will never result in arrest. But it's something the town takes pride in, because we send an officer to every one of those complaints. A lot of other police departments in the Capital District don't even respond to a lot of these
So
complaints.
there'll always be a response.
You call the Colonie Police Department, you ask for a car, we're going to send you a car. Now, some of my officers question that doctrine. But the one positive feedback that I get all the time is the fact that when you call us, we will come. And it's something that we want our officers to have first-hand knowledge of the problems that are going on. You know, in a police car, you can get pretty isolated. You can ride around, everything looks pretty. You don't see what's going on in every single yard or every single living room. If we were to slop off, so to speak, a whole bunch of these calls, you'd think things were pretty quiet in your zone. When in actuality, there are all kinds of problems brewing all over. And a lot of these problems start with very minor things, and they escalate over time. And Mayor Giuliani of New York City was the one to prove that. When he cleaned up Times Square 10, 15 years ago, he did it by starting with the mildest, smallest crimes, those quality of life things, and that took care of the bigger issues.
Now, you mentioned when people call. Is it hard for people to call the police? I mean, you get a lot of phone calls, but I mean, it's difficult for some people, isn't it?
Well, you have to understand, the average American never calls a police department their whole lives. And thank God. They don't feel a need to. So my philosophy personally has been that when a person actually feels that need to do so, then we should be responding as if that's the most important moment of their life at that time. Most of our young officers, they don't get in trouble on calls where there's rapes, robberies, burglaries, or murders. Where they get in trouble with their attitude sometimes is that they don't respond well to that person who just has had a horrible day, had a confrontation with their neighbor, and wants help in pursuing it. So we try to take the stand that it is the person's most important thing in their lives when they have to call the police. So give them the service that they want at that point. To call us, it's very simple. You know, emergency, it's 911.
Okay.
You'll get the operator at our police department. Unless we're so busy, then it's rolled over to another 911 center in Albany County, but that's rare. For non-emergency or for a report call or to report just an occurrence, it's 783-2744. And both these numbers are in the phone book, you know, very easily to obtain. You'll still get the police department at the 2744 number, but it is just a different part of an answering point so that we keep that 911 line open so that people can always get through.
Let's talk a little bit more about, go back to the department itself, and I know there's some specialties that we want to talk about, and one of them is the investigations division, and I know computer crime is a big thing nationwide, and we're specialists in that area, aren't we, in the town of Colonie? Or?
We are actually the first town department in New York State to incorporate its own computer crime unit. We did it through a grant probably almost 10 years ago now, long before computer crime became the in word. We were at the forefront dealing with the FBI, applying for a Division of Criminal Justice grant to outfit a room specifically to handle computer crime. Back then it was dealing with more cybersex, dealing with the problems with our youth, getting online, meeting with those monsters that sometimes prey online, and it was working with the FBI and their sexual exploitation unit in terms of setting up that unit. But that computer crimes lab has become so much more. You know, with the advent of identity theft, with all the white collar crime we do, an awful lot of that material now is broken down in that computer crime lab. You know, we have technicians there, the head of it is Sergeant Ken Fuchs, who has a degree in computer forensics. And he's able to take a computer that everybody thinks is totally deleted, and it's something people should know about before they dispose of any hard drive. It's never totally deleted. When you hit delete, it just puts it in another special spot in that computer. And coming from a computer illiterate person like myself, I've learned a lot from the men and women who've worked in that unit in terms of what they can do and how they can solve crime just by dealing with computers.
Now, it's something that's brought to your attention. I mean, a computer crime, is it what, through business or through some other act that you might then get involved with a computer?
In the business element, it's typically in white-collar crime. It's where the controller of an organization or somebody that has access to files has either stolen files. We've had this a number of times in businesses that maintain computer files of their customers, where an employee may be leaving their employ, and they download their own customer base and they steal customers from their old employer. It could be with the fact where people may be in charge of handling the monies, and they use the computer to fudge records. They use the computer to change the business records, or they use the computer to actually make forged documents to appear like the real thing, and then use that to gain access to other things off to the side. The computer crimes lab now is used probably as much for that type of thing as it is for the pornography, for the sexual exploitation of children, although both are very important.
Right.
It's just opened up a whole new door in us where we may not have been able to help that businessman 10 years ago. Now we can help them solve their crime and put their business back in order.
Apart from computer crime, there's other things that obviously require specialties, and you have forensics and you have a special investigations unit. Can you talk more about that?
Yeah, one thing about our department, you know, we're, as I said before, we're a little too small to be a huge department, but we're too big to be a small department. In investigations, what we've done is we've cross-trained all our investigators to where they can do a number of different things very well, and to the point where they actually specialize in certain things, but only when it's needed. Forensics is a little different, though. In forensics, we actually have 2 full-time people who get extensive training in the forensics field. Obviously, with TV today, with the influences of the media, you know, everybody is looking into forensics and investigation. And what we found is that juries, if they don't hear that forensic tale, if they don't hear that forensic side of things, they're reluctant to find people guilty. And it's really affected us and affected the ways DAs present their cases, because there are some cases that have no forensics. Everybody's waiting for DNA on a check case, and there is no DNA. So, but our people are very highly trained in forensics, but not only the 2 people that we have directly working it every day, but we also then cross-train 4 or 5 other investigators. So if the forensic guys aren't available, it's not like we're sitting there saying, oh my gosh, what do we do now? So we're very fortunate. Throughout our investigation division are people that are very capable of taking fingerprints, of taking samples for DNA, of doing the appropriate things, the appropriate measures, so that we don't let one case slide down just because somebody wasn't available. And that's throughout the investigation division. The special investigations is another end of it. That's the drug cases,
Okay.
narcotic cases. Special investigations may involve a prostitution ring. It may involve an organized crime ring. It may involve our investigation into some of these nightclubs that run in suspicious ways. All right? So special investigation picks up where it's typically a long, detailed investigation that a general investigator just doesn't have time within his caseload to devote without something else falling down. So there are cases of differing magnitudes that wind up in special investigations. But the people that do it, on the same token, they may be handling a special investigation today, and they'll be handling an aggravated harassment tomorrow.
Okay.
So we don't have people who sit in ivory towers waiting for that next big case.
Now, you also have a canine unit.
Yes, we do.
And we're going to talk a little bit more about that.
Well, we've been throughout the years, and we've probably had them for 25 years now, where, you know, the use of dogs in police work is very important. One, it provides a partner for an officer, so it's like having a two-person car out because the dogs are specially trained. Our dogs are trained to track people. They're trained in building search. It makes it so that it's safer for our officers to search a building in the case of an alarm drop or in the case of where we know we have an illegal entry. You'd be surprised the power of a bark when you're trying to get someone to give up. You know, when you take a 30,000 square foot warehouse, which is not a big warehouse, it's huge though if you got to search it with 3 or 4 people. And when it's stacked with goods or hidden, everything is hidden behind boxes, it would take officers hours to search that warehouse. Yell in, make an announcement, the dog's on its way, release that dog in there, and I can guarantee you the boxes will start moving. And either A, people will give up, or B, they'll run for a door. Either way, it saves a tremendous amount of time, resources, and it also adds to the safety of our officers, and that's what's very important.
Now, these dogs are very highly trained, and they are actually attached to an individual officer, aren't they? I mean,
They're trained with the officer. The dogs come to us, the last couple have come to us from Germany through dealers within the United States. They come partially trained already for general things. Then our officers go through an 8 to 12 week period where they literally go, the one was I think held in Rochester, and they spend 8 to 12 weeks, off and on, 3 or 4 weeks at a time, in Rochester doing nothing but training with that dog. That dog is attached to the hip of that officer. And if the officer were to retire, the dog's going to retire too.
With the officer.
And we've had a great success with the program. You know, the expense is minimal when you think of what it would cost to outfit another officer compared to outfitting that dog. It's one of the most cost-effective programs a police department could have.
I've seen demonstrations. It's always fascinating to watch them, always.
Well, the nicest thing about the dogs is it's fascinating to watch them. And other than one of our dogs, most of our dogs are so friendly. You could walk up, pet that dog. Our officers' kids play with the dogs. They are the most docile group of dogs that you could find until they're called to action. And that's what makes them so important within our process.
Before we were talking about the variety of things that are covered in the department, and you mentioned the youth court, and I know it's a distinguished component of the service. Can you talk more about the Colonie Police Youth Court?
Our youth court was incorporated in 1992, actually as a not-for-profit organization, with a tremendous amount of backing from the town. The town provided the space within the court system. Our police officers work very hand in hand with the members of the youth court. But what youth court is it's started with a group of outsiders, meaning people from the community, who saw a need that was based on the fact that our family courts in New York State are so inundated with serious crimes, serious criminals that are under the age of 16. A lot of times when one of our sons or daughters would get arrested in Colonie, they'd go down to their family court and never see a judge, never get services, would basically be told, go home, be good, don't get in trouble again. And what we find in the juvenile justice system, that has no bearing on a child at all. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times that child would just go repeat the offense because they felt that there was no ramifications for the offense. What youth court does is, first of all, we are an internationally renowned program. Our kids have taught at the UN in New York City. We were just featured with the First Lady recently coming to visit our youth court as a model for youth courts across the country. But what our youth court does is basically act as the sentencing end of the juvenile justice process. We are an accredited diversion program to Albany County Family Court. When a youngster gets in trouble for the first time, they can be diverted to our youth court. They sit in front of a jury. There's a prosecutor, there's a defense attorney, there's a judge, there's a clerk. That jury decides the punishment, so to speak. And there's presentations, there's opening statements, closing statements, and the jury goes to deliberate how much community service that young person would do. I think our max was 340 hours, and the minimum, typically the average is between 40 and 50 hours, of which we also, and this is something novel to the whole community service world, we manage our own community service program. So the town of Colonie has benefited almost 30,000 hours of community service over the last 10 years.
That's impressive.
Anything from working at the regional food bank, working at the police department on weekends, cleaning up after activities at different not-for-profits within the area, helping at the crossings at the Family Fun Day. But they also go through mandated classroom work. If they're there for petty larceny, say, they have to attend a shoplifting seminar on the do's and don'ts and why you should not repeat your actions. If they're there for something maybe with their attitude, or maybe they have an outburst at some point that leads to an arrest, they go through anger management sessions. Everything is designed to, one, not so much punish the young person, but make them realize where they went wrong, the mistakes they made. We can give our victims a good feeling because they're actually heard. They were never heard before in family court. Now our victims can come and give a victim's impact statement. One of the young kids will go back and talk to the victim to make sure that their feelings are being known. And another part of the program is that at the end of the community service, that person who went through the program as a defendant has to sit on a jury. So they too then can sit and judge others that have made similar mistakes than them. It's a tremendous program. It not only teaches 100 kids a year that they shouldn't do it, but it also provides 100 kids that actively are part of the program a tremendous civics lesson in how to perform something of good for your community.
I'm afraid we're getting close to running out of time, and I'm thinking I probably haven't covered nearly half of what we could talk about today. And one of the things that I'd like to do possibly is continue the conversation with perhaps some of the other officers to give more insights to a particular aspect of the department. Is there anything you'd like to say before we close in terms of the police department and Colonie, or how people?
Well, obviously, I'm very proud of our police department. I've been there for I'm my 34th year now. I've watched it grow. I've watched times changed. I've watched criminals change, and I've watched the people change in how they adapt to criminality. It's a shame that people don't realize that they have a voice. We want them to know they have a voice, that our phones are ringable and answerable 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And we tell people there's never a problem that's too small for us to talk about. And if you ever have a problem that you don't feel you got the right service, we're just like retail. Somebody out there has a boss to talk to. And town government here in Colonie demands that you go speak to the people at the top if you have to, because we want to give good service, and the police department is no different.
Well, here we are at the end of the show. I want to thank you, Steve, again for coming. And I know you as a town department head, and I know your visibility, but I also believe that you're very visible throughout our community, and I'm grateful for that. And if not, people are going to get to know you better through today's show. So thanks again.
Thank you for having me.
And thanks for joining us on Getting to Know You. I hope you liked our show and will join us next week.
Welcome to Channel 17, the Town of Colonie Government Channel.